Dark Phoenix is finally out, which means time to rank all of the PG-13 X-Men movies from the worst to the best, which means Deadpool and Logan are not going to be on here, so don't ask why they weren't, because this is the PG-13 ones only. Alright, last place, X-Men Origins Wolverine. I enjoyed this movie, but I do understand the criticisms. There were way too many characters introduced in this movie. Gambit, Blob, Cyclops, and the reason for that was they were going to do a whole series of X-Men Origins films, with Magneto and Cyclops set to be the next ones, but this was received so poorly with fans and critics, and did so poorly financially, that they were scrapped. And Magneto's origin story, since that script was already pretty far into production, they just decided to take what they had already done with that one and put it into X-Men First Class. On top of that, Deadpool, or as he's called in this movie, Agent 11, just looks like a cheaper version of Baraka from Mortal Kombat. But I do kind of sort of enjoy the story. It is a good revenge flick. You know, when you're introduced to Wolverine, you know, he has such a happy life and everything, and then they kill his wife, and then he goes to seek revenge. It's almost reminiscent of kind of a Western in that way, which is what Logan tried to be, but that's not going to be on here. So this is like a PG-13 version of Logan. It was a good revenge flick, but overall, in terms of like the X-Men franchise, it's kind of meh. And on top of that, you know, the third act is pretty much where the movie falls apart, because it takes the entire character motivation of Wolverine throughout the entire movie and just completely throws it out the window. It's like, well, his wife was alive the whole time, and on top of that, she was in on it, of her faking her death. So if she had stayed dead, it would have made more sense for why he is the way he is in the other X-Men movies, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense why they did that. Okay, number 8, Dark Phoenix. Horrible script. Very, very bad script. Especially with the way that they handled Professor X. That's the movie's biggest grievance for this movie. That's the movie's most egregious crime. Is they took Professor X, a character who's supposed to be very grandfatherly and understanding and someone you can lean on for a mentor, and they just turned him into this pompous jerk. It's like he's a stuck-up, know-it-all jerk that refuses to acknowledge his mistakes, and that's not who Professor X is. That's the main issue I had with this. And the dialogue in this movie, a lot of it's just very bad. It's fun to watch. I wasn't like checking my watch every 10 minutes like I was with X-Men Origins, but this is like the bare minimum they could have done with this movie. There's potential, and it's not very good. They could have just done more with this than they did, and it was a lazy, minimal effort. All right, number 7, The Wolverine. This was a slightly better Wolverine movie than X-Men Origins, but only slightly. Mostly because of Silver Samurai. They turned him into this joke of a villain, and the plot is really not that interesting. I'm not as engaged with this movie as some of the other ones, and it's just kind of slow, and it's really not enough to keep me engaged. But the writing is better. I mean, there's at least more effort put into this than the other one. So, number 6, X-Men The Last Stand. Upon first viewing, the first time I saw this movie, I remember really slagging on this movie, but rewatching it, it's not as bad as I remember. It's still not very good, but the story is at least interesting, even if the dialogue is kind of clunky. It's a pretty good story with, we found a mutant cure. Should we accept it so we're accepted in society, or should we embrace who we are and deny this cure, even if it means, possibly getting killed by the anti-mutant groups like that? So that's a pretty good... It's trying to be Captain America's Civil War, honestly, even though this came out first. At least this movie came out first. I don't know about the comic storyline, but this movie came out for Captain America's Civil War. It's the X-Men equivalent of that, but it's like a weaker version of that. But the battle scenes are pretty fun. It does feel like a bit of a slap in the face towards the end, though, with Professor X and Cyclops dying, even though Professor X does come back at the end of the Wolverine, because it just feels like after you've watched 1 and 2 that it says, forget about this, and just you feel like you wasted your time investing so much into this. Number 5, X-Men from 2000. The effects in this movie are very dated, but it's still a pretty good movie. Now, I did watch all the X movies in chronological order, starting with First Class and going that way. So I noticed there are some continuity errors when you watch it that way, though, because Wolverine doesn't know who Sabretooth is, even though the whole story of him in X-Men Origins Wolverine was him trying to find Sabretooth to get revenge for killing his wife. And it's kind of a slow build-up to a somewhat okay final battle, but considering this movie came out in 2000 and we hadn't really cracked the formula for superhero movies yet, and this was around the same time that we got like Catwoman and Fantastic Four and movies like that, it has no right to be as good as it is. So, even though it's okay, it's definitely a product of the times, but it's forgivably bad. Number 4, X-Men Apocalypse. People are going to hate me for putting it so high on the list, but I enjoy this movie. I find it pretty fun. There are a lot of really clever 80s pop culture references. I think Psylocke is one of the best characters in this movie. Really, my only two complaints about this movie are that it reused the slow-mo running gag from Days of Future Past. It wasn't funny this time around because we'd already seen it like one movie ago. It feels like they were just trying to make it a running joke and it just didn't work. And Apocalypse really is not that strong of a villain, despite the name. But I still had a fun time with this movie. I do enjoy watching some of the battles in this movie. I love Nightcrawler in this movie. It's still a fun movie. I enjoy it. Number 3, X-Men First Class. This is not just a good X-Men movie. It works as a good spy thriller as well. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender have just great back and forth with each other, and it shows the reasons for why Magneto is a genocidal maniac, because they don't really give a whole lot of backstory to him in the first 3 X-Men movies, so going back and watching this one after you watch those, you kind of feel bad for him becoming what he swore to destroy. He's like, well, I'm going to get rid of... he was captured by Nazis, but he essentially becomes Hitler, trying to wipe out those he doesn't feel are the more evolved. So he ends up becoming what he swore to destroy. Now, Jennifer Lawrence, horrible choice for Mystique. The other actress from the first 3 movies was better. And the other side characters, like Emma Frost and whatever Kevin Bacon's character is named. See, I don't even remember this character's name. That's how forgettable these characters are. But as Professor X and Magneto origin story, it works well. But as an X-Men film, it is kind of weak. But it works well as an origin story for the main 2. And it kind of kicks things off. Number 2, Days of Future Past. This is essentially their apology for X-Men 3. Because they reset everything, so it's like that movie never happened. There are a lot of really good plot twists. And I honestly think that Quicksilver is one of the best parts of this movie. And I think it's just what you think of when you think a comic book movie. It's exactly what it should be. And number 1, my all-time favorite X-Men movie is X-Men 2, X-Men United. Yes, this movie is a bit of a product of the times, with things like the Backstreet Boys being in the movie, and it is a little bit cheesy, but it has one of the best opening scenes of any comic book movie. Nightcrawler invading the White House, and that score, man, so good. That's one of the best opening scenes I've ever seen in a comic movie. It's one of the most exciting X-Men movies. The stakes are higher, the story is better. Everything about this movie takes what was good about the first movie and then improves upon it tenfold. I never get tired of watching this one. The other ones, my opinion of those can change day to day, but this one, pretty solid. That's why X-Men United is my favorite X-Men movie. So, what are your thoughts? Are you mad at me for putting Apocalypse as high as it was? Are you mad at me for putting certain ones lower? What's your ranking? And tell me why. And you can include Deadpool and Logan on your list. I don't care. I didn't, because I didn't watch them, because I don't watch R-rated movies most times. So that's why they're on the list. But if you did, that's cool. I'm not going to deny your comment, as long as it's a respectful discussion. So if you disagree with me, please disagree with me respectfully. Please list your reasons for why they are on that list. And I will see you next time.